All right, welcome everyone again to the BU CTE Center's November webinar spotlighting the Head Impact and Trauma Surveillance Study, or HITSS. So I would like to take a moment to introduce myself and the other moderator, Amanda. I'm Cassandra Ferreira. I work at the BU CTE Center in the Social Media and Digital Marketing Department. Amanda, if you'd like to just introduce yourself real quick.
Sure. Thank you, Cassie. So hi, everyone. My name is Amanda. I'm also a social media and digital marketing specialist at the BU CTE Center. And thank you all so much for joining us. We're excited to learn more about HITSS today.
All right. For this month's episode, we're going to talk about and learn about the Head Impact and Surveillance Study, or HITSS. One of the BU CTE Centers, one of our research studies here. HITSS is a landmark study funded by the National Institute of Health, and this is the largest of its kind. As a brief overview, HITSS is a fully online survey for anyone age 40 and above who played soccer or tackle football at any level. So even if you played at the youth level or in high school or college or even the pros, you can enroll at HITSS.org.
So today we'll be hearing from two members of the HITSS team, Dr. Robert Stern, who's the principal investigator of HITSS, and Matt Roebuck, who is the HITSS Recruitment Coordinator. And today they're going to tell us more about why we need HITSS, how it came to be, what types of outcomes could come from HITSS, and most importantly, how you can help. So first is Dr. Robert Stern, who I said is the HITSS principal investigator. He's the professor of neurology, neurosurgery, and anatomy and neurobiology, director of clinical research at the Boston University CTE Center, senior investigator at the Boston University Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, and the principal investigator for the Diagnose CTE Research Project and HITSS at the Boston University Chobanian and Avedisian School of Medicine. And I'm also going to introduce you to Matt Roebuck, who's the HITSS Recruitment Coordinator. He joined the HITSS project back in 2021, and he's previously worked in Major League Baseball for teams like Boston Red Sox, Miami Marlins, and the Seattle Mariners.
All right, thank you so much for those wonderful introductions, Amanda. So let's kick it off with Dr. Stern to hear more about why HITSS is needed and how HITSS came to be. Dr. Stern, can you share with us why the HITSS project is needed as a part of the research done here at the CTE Center?
I sure can. In 1 second, I'm going to need to have you allow me to start my video. While we're doing that, first of all, while you can't see me, let me at least use my voice to thank, there you are, okay. I want to thank Amanda and Cassie for putting this together, and for all of you for attending live, and anyone who's watching this as a recording. I really appreciate you being here to learn more about this exciting new study, the Head Impact and Trauma Surveillance Study. So I am going to first share my screen, which is always a fun thing in Zoom. And it's going to take just a second to make sure everything works, and swap things, and here we are. So folks, I'm going to start by trying to get to those important things that you just heard that I'm going to talk about, like how does this fit into our research here at the BU CTE Center? Why is this important? But first, I need to just give you a few things that people are often confused about. I hear this all the time, each one of these things, like people being confused, thinking that a concussion is not a brain injury. Well, indeed, a concussion is a traumatic brain injury. We're going to hear something about chronic traumatic encephalopathy. This is the BU CTE Center after all. But CTE is not a brain injury. CTE is a brain disease. You'll hear me tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. Here's probably something that will confuse a lot of you. CTE is not caused by concussions, or at least not only by concussions. This may be confusing to some of you as well. Football does not lead to Alzheimer's disease. There's really no evidence to suggest that playing football and those brain hits that people get leads to Alzheimer's disease. This is also a confusing thing. Alzheimer's disease is not the same thing as dementia. I'll clarify that in a second. And dementia is not a disease. And then helmets do not prevent concussions. All right, so let's talk about concussions, because that's what everyone seems to think about all the time. Everything, when it comes to all these contact and collision sports, everyone talks about concussions, concussion this, concussion that, concussion protocols and all this stuff. Well, let's understand just from the beginning what a concussion is. Concussions occur from forces applied directly or indirectly to the skull, meaning you actually get your head hit, or you can fall on the ground and your head kind of moves rapidly. And whatever that type of force occurs, it's resulting in this rapid acceleration and deceleration of the brain. A lot of people are surprised that a concussion does not require a loss of consciousness. In fact, less than 10% of all concussions have any kind of loss of consciousness. But concussions do require symptoms, meaning unless you have some of the various symptoms that go along with concussion that are part of the diagnosis, there is no concussion, because concussion is defined by having the blow and having symptoms. And if you look on a routine image of the brain, a CAT scan or an MRI scan, there won't be any abnormalities that can be easily detected. And then, like I said before, helmets do not protect the brain from a concussion. Helmets are great to protect skull fractures. That's why they were designed. But they can't stop that brain, which is the texture of like Jell-O mold, moving rapidly back and forth, side by side, and stretching and shearing and having all these changes that go along with it. They can't stop that brain from moving when someone gets hit. A concussion is a traumatic brain injury. It's referred to as called a mild traumatic brain injury, or an MTBI. Mild is a difficult word to use because, yes, indeed, it's less severe than something that would be diagnosed as a moderate or severe brain injury, but it's still a brain injury. And here's the big thing. I am not very concerned about concussions when it comes to later life neurodegenerative disease. So let me explain a little bit further. People hear about dementia all the time. Let me tell you what it means. Dementia is defined as a progressive loss of memory and other cognitive abilities that result in significant impairment to our ability to just get along in our social and occupational settings, routine type of social and occupational functions. In other words, it has an impact on our ability to be independent. Dementia is not part of normal aging. It's also not an illness or disease. It's kind of like if you have a fever. Fever, what does it say? If you have a fever, it means there's something wrong. There's something wrong, but it doesn't say what. Same thing with dementia. Dementia is a clinical syndrome. defined as that progressive loss of memory and other cognitive skills that get in the way of routine daily functioning. But dementia is caused by several different brain diseases. Alzheimer's disease is one of them, but Alzheimer's disease is not the same thing as dementia. Dementia is a later stage clinical manifestation of an underlying brain disease, with Alzheimer's disease being the most common brain disease that eventually results in dementia, eventually, later in the disease course. So it's not a continuum where you have mild problems being dementia and severe being Alzheimer's disease. That's not the way it works. It's actually the other way around. Alzheimer's disease starts around 20, 25 years before the very first symptoms. That's the same with all of these other progressive brain diseases, these neurodegenerative diseases that eventually lead to dementia, things like cerebrovascular disease, frontotemporal lobar degeneration, Lewy body disease, Alzheimer's disease, but you hear a lot now about chronic traumatic encephalopathy. All of these things start years or decades earlier than the very first symptoms. The changes in the brain start, but it's not until later on when more and more brain tissue gets hurt by that progressive disease that the symptoms begin, and then they eventually can get worse. And then they start getting in the way of daily functioning, and that's when someone has dementia. And so it's important to think of this. Football does not lead to Alzheimer's disease, but football can lead to dementia. I'm going to use another word here, the other football. American football is what I've been talking about, but soccer does not lead to Alzheimer's disease. But there's now evidence that, especially in former professional soccer players, there's an increased risk for dementia. All right, so let's make this a little clearer and move it into some of the things we're looking at in the HITSS study. The big topic is repetitive head impacts. Repetitive, over and over again, blows to the head that include that proverbial tip of the iceberg of a moderate to severe traumatic brain injury. That's where in one of those head impacts, there may be something so big that the brain gets severely injured. But those things are pretty rare. But what we see so often are concussions. Remember what a concussion is. It's when there are symptoms. But what about something that may be even more common? Because concussions are just at the surface. That something is what we refer to as subconcussive trauma. And so you can think of those hits that some positions in some sports, like linemen and football, every play of every game and every practice, these heads are hitting each other. And those brains are moving rapidly back and forth, but they may not have a symptom. These aren't the big hits, but the brain is still getting hurt. But it's not just football, it's not just linemen, it's not just pros. Think about what's going on in each of these pictures. There are heads that are being struck. There are heads that are being rapidly moved. And inside those skulls is the most important organ there is in the body, and perhaps the most complex thing that there is in at least our world. And so here at our BU CTE Center, and for me personally, for the last maybe 12 years or so, we've been focusing on this question: do repetitive concussive and subconcussive head impacts lead to later life neurodegeneration? This is a picture of an actual slice of half of a brain, someone who had a neurodegenerative disease. In this case, someone was a former rugby player who had horrible cognitive impairment and behavioral changes in memory, and he was diagnosed with dementia. And after he died, he had no evidence of Alzheimer's disease, but he had very severe chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And we've known about this relationship between getting your head hit over and over again and later life problems for almost 100 years. In a seminal paper that was called Punch Drunk, Dr. Martlin described the later life problems in former professional boxers, using such wonderful medical terminology as goofy and slug nutty. But he said later on, they required institutionalization in an asylum for dementia. And then in 1937, the term dementia pugilistica, the dementia of boxers, was first used. But we've known about chronic traumatic encephalopathy for a long time. The term was first used in 1940 and then more commonly since 1957. It wasn't just come up with out of thin air in the early, I think 2002. It's been around for a long time. So what is it? Chronic traumatic encephalopathy is the same thing as dementia pugilistica. It's a neurodegenerative disease that is similar to Alzheimer's disease, but unique. And it's caused in part by a history of repetitive head impacts, including concussions with those symptoms, but also perhaps most importantly, those subconcussive blows that don't have the symptoms of concussion. And the disease starts during the time of exposure to those repetitive head impacts and sets in motion a cascade of changes in the brain, leading to the accumulation of an abnormal form of a protein called tau, which then continues to spread after the head impacts stop. And it spreads for years and decades, and eventually starts hurting the brain tissue and the functioning of the brain cells. And that's when the symptoms begin. Right now, though, CTE, like Alzheimer's disease and other neurodegenerative diseases, can actually only be accurately diagnosed through a post-mortem neuropathological examination. I'm really honored to be able to work with my colleague and co-founder of the BU CTE Center, Dr. Ann McKee, who's examined more brains with a history of repetitive blows and with diagnoses of CTE than any other neuropathologist in the world. And BU, or the VA BU Concussion Legacy Foundation Brain Bank, is the largest in the world. There's already been over 1,200, I think it's actually now over 1,300 brains that have been donated and examined. So what about CT and dementia? CT can eventually cause dementia, but that doesn't mean that CTE causes Alzheimer's disease. Two separate things. The repetitive head impact exposure can cause CTE, which then eventually can cause dementia, but that does not mean that repetitive head impacts cause Alzheimer's disease. And yet CTE dementia can easily be misdiagnosed by a clinician as Alzheimer's disease dementia because they can look so similar. So here's where we think we are right now with that one disease of CTE, that it starts really early with a few little changes in the brain, like this little brown spot. But that might be asymptomatic, meaning the person might not have any symptoms at all. And then it starts to spread to different parts of the brain. And that's where it may start having some emotional and behavioral changes, something that we refer to as neurobehavioral dysregulation. And then it can get worse and spread to parts of the brain responsible for making new memories or being able to multitask or have adequate judgment and things like that. And then eventually it can spread, destroying enough brain tissue that the person's functioning is so impaired that they can't function independently. And they have dementia. So the big question is, can we diagnose CTE during life? Well, we've been working so hard to do that. I've been fortunate to be able to lead a study called the Diagnose CTE Research Project, and my colleagues all around the world, and especially my close colleagues here at BU, at the BU CTE Center, we've been working on this stuff for a while now to develop ways to use various types of scans and various types of blood tests and spinal fluid tests to be able to detect CTE during life. That stuff requires intensive evaluations and lots of different tests and a whole lot of money on small numbers of people. But what we really still need to figure out, even if we can diagnose CTE during life, is why do some people get it and some people don't? What are the real risks and resilience factors for developing CTE, but also for having any other kind of later life brain difficulty? Problems with thinking and memory and behavior and mood. And so there is a lot that we do now know. There's been huge advances over the last 10 years, but there's still a ton we do not know. That means there's a lot of questions. There's a ton of questions that have to be answered. And so I'm going to turn it over to Matt Roebuck, the incredible recruitment coordinator for the HITSS study, to be able to address some of those questions. Matt?
Yes. Thanks, Dr. Stern. Thank you again, everyone, for joining. It is an honor to be speaking to you all, and especially to play a role in this important research work being done here at the BU CTE Center. So as Dr. Stern said, there's a lot of questions. What are the questions? After all, the aim of HITSS is to find answers to important questions about brain health risks in tackle football and soccer. First question is, do repetitive head impacts in soccer and tackle football affect the risk for later life brain health issues? Simply put, do routine plays like blocking and tackling in football or heading a soccer ball repeatedly increase someone's risk for later life brain health issues? And that's what we want to find out. And then from there, we can look at things like, does having a longer career with more accumulated hits to the head affect those risks? How many head impacts are too many? Does age of starting to play or taking your first hit to the head play a role in those risks? What about different positions on the field? Do they have different risks? How about playing at an advanced level? Are only professional players at risk, or playing up through college? And then also other things like gender or race, do they play a role in those risks? There's a real knowledge gap for female athletes in the sports brain health research space. Thanks to Title IX 50 years ago, more women and girls are participating in sports than ever before. And so we should be celebrating that. But unfortunately, the research opportunities have not kept up for women and girls. HITSS is one of those opportunities. In order to find answers specific to women, we need more women to participate in research studies like HITSS. Female athletes are not small men. There are physiological differences. Boys and girls go through adolescence at different times in different ways. So when we look at soccer, and the great thing about soccer, it's one of the few major sports that there are no rule differences or equipment modifications for women or girls. Men and women, boys and girls play the same game. So when we want to explore if or how gender plays a role in those risks, it's easy to look at soccer because they're playing the same game, but the outcome's the same. But to do that, we need women to participate in research.
Thank you, Matt. That seems like some pretty important questions. Dr. Stern and Matt, who needs the answers to these questions that HITSS will begin to answer?
Sure. First and foremost, the athletes themselves need answers. Players deserve to know what the immediate and long-term health risks are in their sport. During the course of playing, players know that injuries can be an unfortunate part of the game. There's awareness, knee injuries, hamstrings, ankles, all kinds of injuries that we hear about every week. And there's been certainly more awareness now about concussions. Athletes have all kinds of access to resources and world-class facilities for injury prevention, how to stay on the field, how to get back on the field. But what happens post-career? Later life brain health and mental wellness also need to be given the proper attention. Athletes need to be informed to have a better understanding of what their future might hold.
So, it's not just the athletes, it's also family members. It's also parents of those athletes that need some answers. As a parent who's had all 4 of my kids go through various sports, including football and soccer, I sure had some questions, but that was all before we started to know something about this stuff. So I hear all the time from parents, should I let my kid play any of these sports? What, isn't just getting a concussion going to lead them to suicide? Is it going to lead them to a life full of, just destruction and eventual dementia? So one quick thing that everyone has to know is sports and athleticism and being active is critical for kids. Really, really critical. And parents need to understand that. But we have to come up with some meaningful answers to questions about when should kids start playing, either soccer or football or some of the other contact or collision sports. And what is it about those activities that increases risk for later life problems? Kids aren't able to make those decisions on their own. Parents need to get it. There's also significant others, partners, spouses, and adult children of older former athletes who really want some answers. What's going on with mom, dad? What's going on with my partner? Why are they acting like this? Was it due to them playing something earlier in life? Those are real questions that need to be answered.
Yeah, additionally, policymakers need these answers. From an executive standpoint, governing bodies, coaches, players associations, when discussing their policies on safety and examining those currently in place, research is critical to getting the data that can provide the necessary guidance to change those policies or shape new ones at all levels of the game. The guidelines should constantly be evaluated and improved when necessary to protect current and future players. For example, back at another look at soccer, should heading be limited or modified? We talked about having soccer having the same rules for men and women, but should it be that way? If they're affected differently by these repetitive head impacts, then maybe there's a need to have that conversation. Or what about at the youth level? If boys and girls hit their growth spurts at different times, currently there's one universal age limit on heading, but maybe that needs to be looked at as well. What about in tackle football? Is there a safer age to start tackling? We saw, a lot of us saw those guardian caps that the players were wearing during the preseason. Are those helping the athletes protect their brains? Those are questions for policymakers to dive into, and we are not policymakers, but hopefully our research can guide them.
So, there's some others like healthcare providers, public health officials, researchers, who also really need answers to these questions. It is possible that we're at the real beginning of a growing epidemic of later life brain problems in people who are only now in their 40s and 50s and 60s, at the very beginning of people who played tackle football with helmets, played Pop Warner, women, men who played soccer with the smaller, bouncier soccer balls that just started to be used in like the 1980s. All of those repetitive blows that have occurred in football players wearing big helmets and face masks, and soccer players starting to then do heading, those things may increase risk for later life brain disease and other problems. And those people are only now becoming older to the point where they may start showing those difficulties. And there's millions and millions of people just in the US, let alone all around the world, where some of these sports like the real football, soccer, are played by millions each year. And so there may be a public health issue, but also doctors need to have some answers, and other clinicians, about what might be going on with their patients when they come to see them. And researchers, I know as a researcher myself in this area, I need these answers in order to get to the next step of how do we do our research in a meaningful way. And so there are a lot of groups of people, a lot of people who need these answers now. But to do that, we need a large amount of people participating in research, in studies that are really trying to answer questions about risk and resilience, to look at what number, what type, what age, all these different things about getting hit, and then look at people later in life to be able to see what their symptoms are, what their cognitive functioning is, and then hopefully follow people longitudinally. And so that's why we need this stuff.
Thank you again, Dr. Stern and Matt. So when you're talking about the people who need these answers to these questions, such as the athletes and family members and researchers and more that you just mentioned, what can they do to further the process of obtaining these answers? So in short, what can they do to help?
Well, Amanda, thank you so much for asking that question and leading to our infomercial of HITSS.org. What can people do to help? Well, it's pretty darn easy. The most important thing anyone can do right now is to enroll in HITSS, to participate in this research, to be able to have enough people in this study as quickly as possible so we can answer those critical questions. And so if any of you watching this webinar, live or recording, if you're over 40, and if you played soccer or American football at any level, I'm talking about any level, meaning if you just played up through youth and never further, if you played high school, but never went on to play it in college, if you played college at any level, any division, or maybe you even were one of those special people who played beyond and played in the pros or in elite levels, we need you. We need women who played soccer. We need men who played soccer. We need people who play tackle football at any of these levels. And we need people who have never had a concussion. Because remember, concussions aren't the big thing. But if you had concussions, great. Well, it's not great, but if you had concussions, that's fine. But if you didn't, that's fine. If you have symptoms of any type, that's fine. If you don't have any symptoms, that's fine. We need people just who played these sports at any level and are now age 40 or older to participate in this study. So how can you do it? Well, just go to HITSS.org. HITSS, 2 S's to enroll. HITSS.org. Matt, take it away.
Yes, it's easy to enroll. You just go to our website, HITSS.org, HITSS.org, and you can click on the Enroll Now button up in the top corner or down at the middle of the screen. You can certainly feel free to explore our website and learn more. There's some really interesting and useful information throughout our site. But to enroll, to act now, go to our website and click the Enroll Now button. Anyone 40 and older who played soccer or tackle football at any level is eligible to enroll. So please enroll now.
Once you enroll, what is it? What is it that you're getting yourself into? What is it that we're asking you to do? Well, it's not that hard. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to get poked or prodded. It's a fully online study. You do it from the comfort of your own home or wherever it's just you. It's around 2 hours or so, 2.5 maybe, that can be broken up into any chunks of time over lots of time to be able to complete it over a few weeks if you need. And what it is it's a survey, a whole lot of questionnaires, a bunch of kind of self-reported measures of how you're doing, and about your history and details about your involvement in soccer or tackle football or both. And we need to then have you do some cognitive testing online. These standardized, computerized kind of brain game type of tests. And the more you do, the more answers we get. And so anyone who starts this thing, if it seems like it's getting tiring or boring or whatever, please continue. And those cognitive tests need to be done on a laptop or desktop computer. You can't do them from your phone or a tablet. The rest of it you can. But in order to really complete the study, you need to be able to do some of it on a desktop or a laptop computer. So it's pretty easy. And then we'd love people to continue every year. We send you reminder emails that you're coming up to your year, and then you do it again. It's an easy research study. But we need almost 5,000 people to participate. 5,000 people to participate. That's split between American football players, soccer players. Within the soccer, split between women and men. We want people, again, all levels of play. As long as you're 40 years of age or older, all levels of history of playing these sports, we need tons and tons of people. Matt, do you want to kind of talk about kind of how we're going to get people to help?
Yeah. So not only can you help by enrolling, we need people to share this information, pass it along, tell your family members, your friends, colleagues, former teammates from all levels of play. If you played up through college, think about those in your network that may have only played at the youth level or the high school level. Tell them to go to HITSS.org. This is a big time of year for both soccer and football. We've got the World Cup starting in a few days. Next week, we're all sitting down, celebrating Thanksgiving Day, hopefully. It's a big football day. The NFL, high school football in this area up here in greater Boston, some of the oldest high school rivalries in the nation. College football rivalry weekends are coming up. Throw HITSS into those conversations that you're having around those sports. Bring it up at the Thanksgiving dinner table. And even if you're not eligible, well, even if you are, but if you're not eligible, don't think you can't help. You can. I'm certain you know somebody who is 40 plus and played either soccer or tackle football. So please let them know. Put it out on your social media. Amplify our messages by following our social media channels. Share our content to spread the word. Encourage others to enroll. If you or your organization has a newsletter or an email distribution, or maybe you have a podcast, let's talk. How can we get a small blurb about HITSS into your outreach to your members, your alumni groups that you're part of, employees, your readers or listeners? I'd love to have that conversation. Please reach out, hits@bu.edu. Again, hits@bu.edu. Shoot me a note. We've had great support from organizations like US Youth Soccer, the Massachusetts Youth Soccer Association, Soccer Parenting Association, and certainly the United Soccer Coaches. A small little plug for United Soccer Coaches. If you're going to be at the United Soccer Coaches Convention in Philadelphia in January, come see us. We're going to have a booth set up. Dr. Stern will be hosting an educational session with Soccer Hall of Famer, the great Bruce Murray, on the impact of head impact. So come by and say hello, come by and listen. But the more eyes and ears we can get this in front of, the more people we can encourage to enroll, the faster we can find answers. All those former athletes, male and female, who may have only played 30, 40, 50 years ago. We need to let them know about this. They may not even think of themselves as athletes today or as former athletes, but we need to remind them they are former athletes. Let them know they can help us find answers by going to hits.org and taking the survey. Again, anyone 40 plus who played soccer or tackle football at any level, even if it was just the youth level or only in high school, but certainly also former college and professional elite players as well. Please go to hits.org, enroll, and tell others.
That's HITSS.org. I'm kind of joking that this is an infomercial, but to get 5,000 people into this, and poor Matt is the recruitment coordinator. He's responsible for getting all these people in. We only have a couple years to get everyone in so we can then do all the assessments. In order to do that, we have to reach out to millions of people who will see this, hear about this, and then be encouraged or turned on to be able to go to the website, and then from the website, click enroll, and then do it, finish it. And so one of the things that we've been very fortunate about having the ability to spread the word is that we've had several incredible ambassadors, former You'll hear from Matt, former, Hall of Famers, former Olympic medalists, you name it, who are helping spread the word without getting paid. They're just supporting us. They are our ambassadors to everyone else who will say, hey, this is important. Matt.
Yes, it's a very impressive roster, and some incredible people have come on board to help us. We've got Super Bowl champions and World Cup winners and gold medalists, Emmy winners, a whole slew of Hall of Famers. And you can go to our website, again, as part of all the great information we have on our website, and find out more about each of these people. There's some very cool videos that they've done in support of this project. But these are people who have done everything within their sport, on and off the field, held front office roles. We have a super agent. We've got an Emmy-winning broadcaster, and then certainly some of the biggest names to have played these sports. They've donated their time, their platforms, their voices to help spread the word about HITSS because it's important to them. They're connected to this cause. And just to get personal for a minute here, in talking to them and in each of them, to bring them on board and ask for their support, that was the most important thing for me to be involved in this work. I don't come from a research or a science or an academic background. I worked in the front office of 3 Major League Baseball teams in communications roles and working directly with athletes, some of the biggest names in baseball. So when I first got involved in this project, in this HITSS project at the BU CTE Center, I wanted to make sure that this research was important to the athletes. It was something that they wanted. With all due respect to Dr. Stern and the incredible team, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't something that just doctors and scientists want to look at, but those that are in the game, those that have played the game, those that are actively involved in the game. And I had the opportunity to have some amazingly moving conversations with the individuals you saw a minute ago, and you can see on our website, and you can hear their stories, and so many others who all told me, yes, unequivocally, yes, this research is needed. They said, this is important to me, my teammates, my family members, because we need to know. And I want to help spread the word so we can get answers. I had one person say to me, I pledged to donate my brain, but I can't wait. I don't want to wait until then. What good will that do me? Because once they get to look at it, it's too late for me to understand what's going on. And brain donation is such a critical piece of all of this work. But to hear somebody say it in those words that, for me, it's too late. They want to do, he said to me, I want to do all that I can to find answers in my lifetime. And let that sink in for a minute. There are things that we can do now, and getting as many people as we can to enroll in HITSS is one of them, to move towards finding those answers.
So, there is so much that we have learned. Dr. McKee and other neuropathologists have done such an incredible job of understanding, kind of unlocking the mysteries of what's going on in the brain with CTE. It can be diagnosed pretty well, clearly with agreement across different neuropathologists, but that's all after people die. We don't think it's just all CTE, that disease that people talk about. It's not just that. There's other things that can be going on later in life in a brain that has had that exposure to repetitive head impacts. We need to figure out those things. And we need to figure out, once again, why some people have problems later in life, why some people don't. Do we need to just stop all sports? Oh, of course not. Are there things that we can do to make them safer? Are there things that we can inform players, coaches, athletic trainers, league officials about what might be helpful to improve the long-term health of these athletes? But we can't just say, oh, yep, we got all the answers, because we don't. And we can't wait until we can diagnose a certain disease during life. We don't have the luxury of waiting. We need to understand as quickly as possible, what is it that increases some people's risk for later life brain health problems? And what is it that might increase people's resilience? And so please help us. Please help us by enrolling into HITSS.org, going to our website, HITSS.org, or spreading the word through all the ways that Matt was mentioning before. Please help us spread the word so we can get these answers as quickly as possible. So speaking of answers, it would be great if we could maybe take a few of the questions that people have been leaving on the Q&A. I know there's been some really important ones. I just want to thank Matt for doing this and all the work that he's been doing, but also the rest of our HITSS team at BU. We're also doing this in conjunction with the Brain Health Registry at the University of California, San Francisco, and my colleague out there, Dr. Mike Weiner, and the team doing the Brain Health Registry, and my colleague, Mike Alasko. Dr. Alasko is one of the leaders in this field right now, and all our other colleagues here at the BU CTE Center. But let's take some of the questions. I saw one that I really would like to answer, and that is, just want to make sure I'm getting it set. Someone said, I only played 1 year of youth soccer as a goalie, and so I didn't have any concussions. Should I take part in HITSS? That's a common thing we hear. Matt, what's the answer to that?
Yes, if you are 40 plus and you played youth soccer or soccer at any level, you can enroll in HITSS, and you should enroll in HITSS.
That's a pretty good one. Do concussions with loss of consciousness pose more risk of CTE than concussions without loss of consciousness? I wish I could tell you. We don't know. We really don't know. That's one of the things we're trying to figure out. And that's part of the questions that are asked as part of the HITSS survey. Matt, here's another one. Could my style of play in a contact sport affect the severity or nature of my later life brain problems? Want to try it?
I think I'll leave that to you. You're the scientist.
Oh, yeah, you know, the big answer, the quick answer for that one is pretty much the same. We just don't know. But that's an important thing that we're trying to do, is to figure out, you know, by asking people, let's say, who played soccer, did you do a lot of heading or not? And to look at the different eras of play, because these sports were played differently with different balls, different helmets, some different rules, different body size across the many decades leading up to now. And so we need to look at style of play in general, but also style of play individually to figure out if there are problems later on.
I just want to add real quickly, if anyone in our live listening audience, if you have questions, you please post them in the chat, and hopefully we'll get to them. But if you don't, or if we don't have time to get to them, please reach out to us. You can send us a note at HITSS, HITSS @bu.edu, and drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you if you have other questions that we might not get to today or we didn't answer today. But please feel free to shoot them in the chat today. I know we're up at 5 o'clock now, and if you have to jump off, we greatly appreciate you joining us tonight, but feel free to stick around. We'll try to answer as many as we can. And if we aren't able to get to it, please reach out to us.
We are here. That's one of the important things, is that we can only get to answering our questions by being able to answer your questions. And so please make sure that you contact us at, what's the email, Matt?
It's HITSS, HITSS @bu.edu, or you can go right to our website. Again, www.hitss.org, HITSS.org. There's a form right at the bottom of our website where you can submit questions there as well. And certainly you can enroll in HITSS.
If anyone's going to be dropping off soon, I just want to end with this this one thing, and then we can try to answer a few more questions. We are looking for answers. We're not able to diagnose disorders through this study. We're not going to be able to give people diagnosis or provide treatment through this study. But if we can get those 5,000 people enrolling and completing the survey and doing it as many years as they can moving forward, then we'll come up with answers that will help us figure out those important moves toward changing the way sports are played or decision-making is done, or perhaps giving people some solace that maybe it's okay. The goal is not to say things are bad. The goal is to truly answer questions objectively, without any bias. The goal is to have lots and lots of people enroll so we don't have bias of various other types of studies. We also, remember, we're not just looking at professional former American football players like so many of our studies and other studies have done. We're looking for people who only played up through youth, or only played up through high school or through college, and also as many pros and elite players in soccer and American football as possible, anyone over age 40. Please go to our website, HITSS.org. Let's do one of the questions that just came in. I'm going to look at this. It says, thank you, Dr. Stern and team. What's the data suggest from those former athletes already confirmed to have had CTE? Are there preliminary profiles of risk factors that you can share from the research to date? It's a great question, and that's really so much of where we are right now, is from people who've passed away and their brains have been examined, those who do have evidence of CTE, those who don't, those who have kind of early, milder CTE, those who have more advanced stage CTE. What is it that we currently know about risk factors? Well, one thing that is now pretty darn clear, that is that CTE is caused in part by repetitive head impact exposure. It's not caused by a single injury. We also know that the more exposure people have, at least in football, the greater the risk. For every year that's played at any of these levels, the greater risk for later life problems. There's also evidence from our group recently that it's not just the total number of any type of hit. It's the combination of how many hits that we can estimate and how intense they are, how intense they were. So overall, the answer so far is the more exposure to these blows that someone has, the greater the risk for CTE. That's about as far as I can go right now in terms of risk factors. We do have a study, I guess, that came out a little while ago that looked at one of the common genes for a variety of brain conditions, and in fact, other conditions of the body, genetic susceptibility type of finding, which means that having the abnormal form of this gene called ApoE can increase the risk of getting CTEs, maybe having more severity, but it doesn't mean if you have it, you will get CTE. It also means that if you don't have it, you still can get it. So we're learning more. The more research we're doing about genetics, which we're currently really focusing a tremendous amount on, the more we're going to understand that. We're also looking at things like race, but perhaps more importantly, the things that are associated with race. Those very, very important things that are not due to whether someone is of one race or another, or one ethnic group or another, but what about the social determinants of health that are associated with those things? What about some of the important issues that so many kids grow up with stress, with not the best nutrition, with not the best educational opportunities, with not the best health care, whether or not they are one race or another. But these disparities can have a huge impact on later life health in general. And we know later life brain health, but we don't know the details. And so one of the additional things that we're trying to do with HITSS is to understand racial differences, but more importantly, differences and the impact of social determinants of health through life, and how that can have an impact on later life brain problems. So I see that it's now getting even later, and I'm thinking that we should end. Cassie, Amanda, I want to thank you both for getting this set up. Matt, any final words from you, sir?
My final words, I appreciate everybody coming out and listening to this, and certainly helping us move this forward. Again, it's an honor to be part of this work. It's an honor to do this work for people who need answers, and that's everybody, because everybody that I've come across when I speak about this and tell them about this work immediately says either I should be part of it themselves, or I know somebody. And so please help us do this work for all of them.
Yes, thank you so much for everybody for coming. Just so you guys are aware, if you want to go straight to www.hits.org, that QR code will send you directly there. And all of ours and HITSS social medias have been listed on the website, on the screen as well. Thank you so much for coming, and our next webinar will be announced pretty soon. I'm going to leave this up for a little bit, just in case anybody needs to screenshot it or write down any of this information. But yeah, thank you guys so much for coming.
Thank you.